I used to work at a small restaurant, the kind squeezed between a coin laundry and an old pawn shop. The air always smelled of fryer oil and soy sauce, both inside the kitchen and out back in the alley. The place stayed open late, and after the last customer left and the dining room returned to silence, I would help the chef clean up and prepare our staff meal. The chef had a soft spot for a stray cat that often lingered near the back alley. Almost every night, he would cook a little plain chicken or boil an egg just for her. Eventually, I joined in the habit. We would leave the food in a shallow ceramic dish under the back door's light near the trash bins. It became a quiet little ritual. After closing, I'd crouch down and place the chicken or egg into the bowl, waiting for the familiar soft meowing that signaled her approach. One night, I was carrying the food the chef had prepared for the cat and headed to the back alley to fill her ceramic dish. I looked around, but there was no sign of her. I called out a few times, but she didn't appear. I was used to it. After all, she had always been elusive. That's just how cats are. Sometimes she'd appear silently behind me before I even realized. I crouched down and placed the egg, chicken breast, and a few pieces of broccoli into her little bowl. Just then, I felt a light, playful tug on my apron string. Not just a simple pull, but the kind of gentle teasing you'd expect from a cat playing with a ribbon, like how they bat at a feather wand. I chuckled and let it continue for a moment, assuming she was just being playful again. But then I heard it. A soft meow. But it didn't come from behind me. It came from several meters away. I looked up. The cat was walking slowly toward me from the far end of the alley, her steps cautious, as if she had just arrived. My smile froze. I slowly turned to look over my shoulder. Nothing. Just the cold brick wall, my own shadow, and the stench of garbage. I told myself it was the wind. Or maybe I'd shifted, and the string had just moved on its own. I didn't believe it, but it was enough to get me back inside. That thing didn't bother me for long. In fact, I forgot about it fairly quickly. After all, the back alley was somewhere we had to go every day. My unease faded faster than I expected. One night, I was taking out a large bag of garbage, heading toward the metal dumpster at the far end of the alley. I pushed open the back door, and the familiar dim yellow glow of the streetlight spilled into the narrow passageway. Everything was cast in that warm, murky light that somehow made the shadows seem even darker. As I approached the dumpster, I caught sight of something. Two bright eyes low to the ground, peeking out from the far corner where the light didn't quite reach. A faint glint of eyes, fixed and unblinking. I crouched slightly, thinking it might still be her. I smiled, lowered the heavy trash bag, and knelt so my eyes were level with the glowing pair. I made a soft sound, the same way I always greeted her. But when I knelt down and looked closely at the eyes, I froze. They weren't the cat's eyes. These were different. They just watched. The moment I blinked, the shadow moved. A cold wave of fear crept up my spine. It didn't move like any animal I knew. It slid, fast, smooth, too fluid, unnatural. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. Then I saw the smile, floating in the dark, wide, disturbingly human, too wide. Just a grin full of teeth, stretched across a face I couldn't fully see. My skin prickled, and I was unable to move. My limbs numb, I opened my mouth wide, but no sound came from my throat. Suddenly, the cat darted past me. Her fur stood on end, back arched, growling low and deep. A sound I'd never heard from her. She stood firm, staring straight at the shadow, and the shape paused, then slowly slid backward, disappearing into the shadows behind the dumpster, as if melting into the blackness. I remained motionless, barely breathing. Then, as if the moment had never happened, a motorbike zipped past the mouth of the alley. Its headlights swept across the corner where the shadow had hidden. There was nothing there, no eyes, no smile, no trace. On some nights, while the kitchen staff were cleaning up after closing, we would hear scratching at the back door. At first, it was soft, faint, and sporadic. Most of us assumed it was the stray cat, hungry again. We'd open the door, expecting to see her waiting. But each time, the alley would be still and empty. Nothing stirred outside. Only a strange smell lingered in the air, a foul mix of rust, wet fur, and rot. Not long after, I left the restaurant and started working at a bookstore on the other side of town. The hours were quieter, the lighting warmer. I couldn't bear to leave her in that alley anymore. No matter what, I knew the alley wasn't a safe place. I brought her home with me. We've lived together for 5 years now. She still sleeps at the foot of my bed. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and find her sitting up, staring intently into the dark corner of my room. Her tail sways slowly, and her ears stand alert. I always feel strangely comforted when she does that.
I had already changed into my soccer uniform and was sitting on the couch, waiting. My backpack sat at my feet while cartoons played on the TV. I must have been around 8 or 9 years old at the time, back when Saturday mornings meant soccer practice and sugary cereal. It was Max's mom's turn to drive us to soccer practice that day. Our moms took turns every month, and Max, my best friend, lived in the same neighborhood. His mom was never late. As the light from the TV flickered across the living room, my eyelids grew heavier. Right when the show cut to commercials, I unknowingly drifted off to sleep. The next thing I felt was something warm and gentle patting my hand. I opened my eyes. It was my mom, waking me up. She said Max's mom was already waiting in the driveway. Still half asleep, I got up slowly, grabbed my backpack, and headed toward the front door. My foot suddenly slipped on something soft and round. I lost my balance and fell forward. That sharp, sinking feeling jolted me fully awake. I landed hard on the floor, my ankle pulsing with pain. When I turned to look, I saw a blue ball slowly rolling away down the hallway, disappearing around the corner. Its movement was eerily smooth, almost too quiet, but in the stillness of the house, I could hear it clearly. I sat up, wincing. My ankle was red and a little swollen. The loud thud must have startled my mom. She jumped up from the couch and rushed over. She held me, checking my arms, legs, and head. Luckily, I'd landed on the thick carpet. It hurt, but nothing seemed seriously injured. She carried me back to the couch and told me I should stay home from practice to rest. She said she'd call Max's mom and the coach to explain. My ankle throbbed faintly, so I nodded in agreement. She sat me down and went to get an ice pack and a glass of orange juice. She also searched the hallway for the blue ball I told her about. I'd clearly felt it under my foot. I'd seen it. But she looked everywhere. Under the furniture, in the corners, even opened the shoe cabinet. She found nothing. The hallway was spotless, like nothing had ever been there. She looked puzzled and said if the swelling didn't go down in 30 minutes, she'd take me to the doctor. I sipped my orange juice and kept the ice pack on my ankle, watching cartoons. Sunlight poured in through the curtains, casting long stripes across the floor. 30 minutes later, I removed the ice pack and was surprised to see the swelling had disappeared completely. I stood up, waving the ice pack in victory, and headed to the study to tell my mom. The door was slightly open. I saw her inside, holding her phone and talking in a hushed voice. Her eyebrows were tightly knitted, and she looked worried. She didn't notice me standing quietly at the door. After about 10 minutes, she ended the call and finally saw me. She rushed over and hugged me tightly. Later that afternoon, I found out Max and his mom had been in a car accident, right near the soccer field. A car had slammed into theirs. Both of them, sitting in the driver and passenger seats, were somehow completely unharmed. The other driver was fine too, but the back seat, the one I always sat in, was crushed in the crash. If I had gone with them, like I was supposed to, I might not have made it back in one piece. Before I was born, my parents had a golden retriever named Cooper. They used to tell me stories about how loyal and playful he was. He passed away from cancer. His favorite toy was a soft blue rubber ball. When he died, they buried it with him. But the ball I tripped on that morning, it was exactly as they described it. My mom still tells this story at every family gathering. She says Cooper came back just once to protect me, and every time she says it, I can't help but believe her. We live in a quiet little town with 2 furry companions. Kubi, our boxer, is loyal and watchful, always ready to protect. Mimi, our black and white tabby, has markings like a tiny cow, hence the nickname Cow Cat. Mimi used to be a stray before we adopted her from a shelter. Maybe because of her past, she's never fully settled into indoor life. Every morning after breakfast, she stretches, walks to the door, and gently scratches it, asking to go out. I usually let her out before heading to work. She spends the day exploring the neighborhood but always returns around 7 p.m., as if she knows it's dinner time. We're always amazed by how accurate her internal clock is. We never worried about her. The town is peaceful, and she never wanders far. She has her usual route. The neighbors love animals, and everyone knows each other. Almost everyone knows Mimi. Sometimes people send us pictures of her sunbathing in their gardens or being petted by strangers, like she's the town mascot. But one evening, everything changed. I got home, and Mimi wasn't back yet. At first, I didn't think much of it. She'd stayed out late before. Maybe something had caught her attention. But by the time it was close to 7 p.m., there was still no sign of her, and I started getting worried. My wife and I decided to search for her. We asked a neighbor to stay home in case she returned, then split up to look for her. I took Kubi and walked along Mimi's usual path, while my wife drove to a few of Mimi's farther hangouts. The sun was setting, casting orange and purple across the sky, eventually fading into the heavy blue of night. Kubi and I picked up our pace, and I called for Mimi again and again. Neighbors helped shout her name too. Kubi kept sniffing the air, ears alert, scanning every dark corner where a cat might hide. It was fully dark now. The streets were dim, lit only by a few streetlights and windows with soft glows. Shadows deepened, and Mimi's black and white fur was nearly invisible in the darkness. Then I saw her. A cat with cow-like markings darted across the road and slipped into a run-down, abandoned house at the end of the street. My heart leapt. "Mimi!" I called and rushed after her, but Kubi stopped at the doorway, growling low and refusing to go in. I stepped onto the porch, overgrown with weeds, and scanned the shadows. "Stay here," I told Kubi with a hand signal. He whined softly, clearly uneasy, but obeyed. I didn't want to leave him, but I had to check. That cat looked just like Mimi. If I didn't find her tonight, I'd never sleep. She's not young anymore, and even with her street smarts, it was getting colder. Winter was approaching. I stepped into the creaking doorway. The house was empty. No furniture, just bare walls, dust, and echoes. I turned on my flashlight and began calling Mimi. My voice echoed off the peeling, cracked walls. Then I heard it. A faint jingling sound upstairs. I looked up at the ceiling, trying to pinpoint it. My heart beat faster. Was that Mimi? I slowly climbed the narrow stairs. The flashlight beam bounced off splintered drywall. That faint bell continued, just barely audible. The second floor was in worse shape. Broken windows, wind howling through, low and mournful. Every creak and gust put me more on edge. I followed the sound into a small room. The windows were shattered, wind rushing in and pulling tattered curtains like restless ghosts. The bell jingled again. I called Mimi once more. This time, I heard a faint sound in response. And then I saw them, two glowing green eyes watching me from the corner. "Come on, Mimi," I whispered, stepping forward. She answered again, but didn't move. I reached out my hand, just about to touch her. Suddenly, a deafening bark shattered the silence. I spun around, heart pounding, the noise echoing through the house, and saw Kubi. Somehow, he had crept up the stairs behind me without making a sound. Then I looked past him and froze. Mimi was standing next to Kubi. They both stared past me into the darkness behind me. I turned back to look, but there was nothing there. Nothing. Until I noticed the floor in front of me. A massive hole right where I had been about to step. One more step, and I would have fallen straight through. We left the house. Kubi remained alert the whole time until we were far away from that house. I didn't tell my wife what had happened. I didn't want to worry her, but lying in bed that night, a chill ran through me. We never gave Mimi a bell. We never even bought one. We had read somewhere it could hurt a cat's hearing. I wrapped the blanket tightly around myself. Looks like I won't be getting any sleep tonight.